Thank you, Mr. Chairman. While in no way denigrating all the discussion that we've had today about staffing and training and adequacy and hours of work, I think all those are contributors, but I'm surprised. I want to turn to an entirely different subject. Every boat in the Gulf of Maine has a radar on it that tells us when there's another boat within a mile or 2 miles or 5 miles, an alarm goes off, it shows up on your GPS. How in the world does a billion-dollar destroyer not know that there's a freighter closing in on it? I don't understand how this could possibly happen. And I've talked to Maine lobstermen, they're scratching their heads. They can tell when there's a flock of seagulls off their bow.
Sir, got the same questions. It's very hard to understand with the sophisticated systems on board these warships that we let a ship get in that close to the point of collision. And so that is a direct
Not a
focus
ship,
of-
3 ships. 3 of these were collision with
Right.
merchant vessels.
Yes, sir.
I mean, aren't there, can you give me an answer specifically? Aren't there radar systems
are,
on
yes,
these
sir.
ships
There's
that would
a
detect
primary-
anything within the range?
There's a primary and a backup radar that should detect those ships. There are systems that can alert you at a particular range, and so we have to find out what happened.
Is there a black box on these ships like there is on an aircraft so we can determine what the sequence of events was?
We'll get to the sequence of events, yes, sir.
And the second question is, don't we have sailors on the bridge with
We
binoculars
do. It's
anymore?
a requirement to have lookouts, and we have lookouts on the watch team on the bridge.
Is there, and the other question is about the radar of the ships that ran into us. Is there some technology that they couldn't see us? Are we using a stealth technology? Anything you can answer in an open setting?
Sure. I mean, it's wouldn't surprise anybody. I think that we design our warships to have a lower radar cross section. I mean, it's some designed to be very low, right? So that degree of stealth makes us more effective from a warfighting standpoint. But that also imposes a burden, if you will, on the crew of that ship to understand that they are low observable and that they may not be as easily seen as something that is as large as a destroyer. It'll have a radar cross-section of a ship that's much smaller.
Or if they're not in a conflict situation, to emit some kind of signal to
That's
another.
been an immediate action, is that there is this automatic identification system, AIS, that the Secretary mentioned, and we had, I think, a distorted perception of operational security that we kept that system secure off in our on our warships. One of the immediate actions following these incidents is that, particularly in heavily trafficked areas,
Trafficked areas like,
we're just going
like,
to turn it on. I mean,
like
you can-
Japan.
Right, you can look outside and see the ship, and so it's not an operational security standpoint.
So you can't report to us today any results of investigation into what happened with the non-performance of the radar system?
Those specifics are forthcoming
Forthcoming soon?
as soon as the investigations are complete, yes, sir.
All right, let me turn from this subject for a moment to maintenance. I think the testimony from our friend from the GAO was that the maintenance capacity is not adequate and that therefore we have ships that are in port too long, and that puts a strain on the ships that are left at sea. Is that accurate?
I think Mr. Pendleton painted that exact picture. The words he used were vicious cycle, and I would agree that's a good characteristic of that.
Because these ships are expensive, as you know, and anytime you have a capital object that's expensive, Secretary Spencer, you know from your business experience, you want it operating. Do we need to be talking about increasing the capacity of the maintenance yards to cut down on that time off the ocean, if you will?
I'll go first. I think that there's no doubt that we could use increased maintenance capacity. Right now, we are leveraging every ounce of capacity, I think, across the nation, both public and private, to execute the maintenance that we need.
But if we're executing on every ounce of capacity and it's not adequate, sounds to me like we need more
We
capacity.
need more, yes, sir.
And is that in the plans anywhere? Is that in any submissions of budgetary priorities in the future?
Well, one of the other reports that Mr. Pendleton just recently issued was a report on our shipyards, and so how to increase the capacity through modernizing our shipyards. We work closely with the private sector to have these discussions all the time in terms of how do we increase that capacity. So it's something that has our attention, yes, sir.
One final question on the technology. I would urge that a standard practice ought to be for these locational radar that keep an eye on what's in the vicinity, that if there should be an alarm, which I'm sure there is, and B, it should ring in the captain's quarters. If anything comes within whatever the set distance is. It's really unacceptable in this day and age with the technology that we have to have something like this happen, regardless of the wider issues.
Now-
This is just unacceptable from a modern seamanship point of view, it seems to me.
Sorry, I agree with you 100%, and that's why I'm fighting the tendency to characterize this. I mean, certainly there are tearing down forces that are broader. We've discussed many of those today, but this will go to, proper operation of your equipment, fundamentals of watch standing. Those are the things that we have to look at.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.